It was December of 2010. I was one decision away from leaving the mortgage industry altogether. So I started in 2005 at a refinance call center, kind of a chop shop mentality right out of college. And after the crash, I kind of bounced around, did some wholesale stuff, tried to manage some things. And at the end of 2010, interest rates moved up a little bit. Most people's income went down. And I remember just getting a little upset, calling my dad and saying, you know what, I'm kind of sick of this. I'm going to go back to law school. I'm going to go get my MBA. I'm just going to do something different. And I remember he said to me, he goes, why don't you try and go maybe talk to some realtors, introduce yourself, and maybe they can send you business and you can kind of run a relationship-based business. And I remember vividly saying, Dad, I don't think that's a thing. I don't think people do that. Well, needless to say, people do that. And thank goodness I took his advice. You know, I remember having my first business card and I went to a broker preview meeting on my kind of first day in this new venture. I'd been in the business at this point 6 years, but I'd never met a realtor. I'd never done a purchase transaction. I had no database of clients, no CRM. I was literally just out there winging it. And I remember going to that broker preview and I was so nervous. I could see the business card shaking in my hand as I was holding it. I didn't talk to a single person and I actually left before the broker preview was over, so nobody would talk to me. That year in 2011, in March 2011, when I started, we helped 29 families for roughly $11 million in total volume. And by the end of this year, 2020, we'll have the privilege of doing $1.2 billion in production volume, and we'll have helped over 2,900 families accomplish their real estate and financial goals. The reason I'm telling you this is because the goal that I have today is to help everyone on this call understand what it takes to go from 11 million to 1.2 billion in under 10 years. And the simple answer is scale. You need to hire more employees, but that's not the answer. The underlying way to accomplish scale is through one concept, right? It's a simple concept. It's not easy, but it's simple. And that concept is trust. So I didn't know this 9 years ago when I started. And back in 2011, trust was not my driving factor. It wasn't scaling a team. It was just, let's figure this thing out. Right? But one thing I do realize now looking back was that I did trust in myself, right? I trusted if I just put my head down, if I worked hard enough and worked long enough hours and was just a good enough person to people, that I could at least make enough money to make a decent living, right? To have a good enough life. If I were to tell you that I had a plan for getting to 1.2 billion or that I even had that on my radar, I'd be lying to you. Because those things just came over time by trusting what I was doing. So I'm going to ask a question here. And that question is, how many steps and how long would it take to walk around the world? Answer to that question is over 67 million steps, depending upon which website you look at. And it would take over 2.5 years to accomplish that. So now ask yourself the question, if you were going to take that journey, would it be better or worse if you already knew that information? And I would argue unequivocally that it would be worse. Right? And that was one of the real benefits that I had, is that when I started in 2011, from that point till December of 2014, I didn't have a coach, I didn't have mentors, I didn't know that there were loan officer rankings, I didn't know what the Scotsman Guide was. Right? There was nobody other than the data that my company gave me that would really put my production versus others, and that was a really great thing. Right? Because I was ignorant to the fact that when I was doing my 11 million, people were out there doing $200 million plus. Now, had I known that, it probably would have taken the wind out of my sails a bit, right? It would have knocked me off my course. I would have tried to shortcut it. I would have felt, what's wrong with me? How am I only doing this amount? But the fact that I didn't know that was helpful. All I had to do was trust that if I do the right things every day, that I'm just going to do more the following year. So that leads me kind of to my next point, which is another part of how ignorance is good for you, right? How it can be helpful is that we have a really challenging problem in our industry, probably in our industry more than most, which is we have a comparison complex. Right? We constantly compare our lives and our businesses to others. And I'm going to urge you, if you take away one or two things from maybe this entire day, please stop comparing yourselves to other people and other loan officers' production. Right? Because we shouldn't be comparing production versus production. We should be comparing production versus performance. And there's a very big difference there. Because there's plenty of people, plenty of loan officers that will outproduce us from a unit and volume perspective. But I trust in my bones that very few people will outperform us. And the production versus performance is not just in your business life, it's also in your personal life, right? Because the measure of success is not just income or production, right? It's how are you performing in your relationships in life? How are you performing with your health and wellness? How are you performing with your kids or your work-life balance? So I'm going to ask that everyone trust the fact that if they focus on the performance aspect of the business, that the rest of it will come, right? The success will show up. Now, you're probably thinking, all right, Ryan, at this point, we just kind of need to know the steps. And I wish I could tell you in 18 minutes every single step, but I just have to focus on the one key component here, which is trust. And it's important that you understand we are playing an infinite game. Some of you may have read the book by Simon Sinek called Infinite Game. Most companies, most industries, they play a game that they run their business as if it were a game, as if there was 9 innings or there was a clock that was going to expire, right? And so they always have a scoreboard of whether they're winning or losing the game. And I'm here to tell you that that's not what we should be doing, right? We simply have to trust the fact and not compare ourselves to others, right? Because all you need to do is compare yourself today versus who you were yesterday. And if you're better in your business and your life today than you were yesterday, and you plan on being better tomorrow, then you're playing the infinite game, because the infinite game allows you to do something that is completely different. Right? The mediocrity in our industry and in almost any industry makes up a vast majority of the population. The people who are operating at a really high level, that focus on the details, that trust their team, that trust in themselves, that create a process that is wildly different than everybody else, those are the people that are going to win long term. And the win is the succession plan, right? It's your ability to do this for however many years you want to do it, and then be able to earn income off of that once you decide to retire. Right? But you can only do that if you're not saying, okay, here's the scoreboard, because there's going to be people who are outperforming you from a production perspective. But I tell you what, I'd rather do 10 loans and perform at a 10 than do 100 loans and perform at a 5. And I would argue that there's a lot of people that are doing 100 loans and performing at a 5. And that's a finite game, because they believe I'm winning, but long term, because there's no end to the game, they're not actually going to win. So shifting away from mindset for a minute here, we want to talk about the client experience and the overall value that you're offering, right? Because the trust that you have in yourself, the trust that you have in your team, also needs to be coming from the client side. Right? So one of the decisions we made when we were working our way through our client experience was that we had to create a system, or become a part of a system, that allowed us to trust that all of our loan officers and all of the people on my team and in our whole region would deliver on our brand promise. And our brand promise is that we are going to help our clients proactively and consistently create generational wealth on an ongoing basis, save as much money as possible while we're helping them, making sure that they're avoiding any bad decisions and having any emotional kind of reactions as their life is changing and evolving, and helping them proactively plan for the future. Now, that brand promise, I can't entrust that's going to happen. Most loan officers aren't equipped from a systems perspective and a consistency perspective to accomplish that. So when we joined the Art of Homeownership platform, it allowed me to trust that all of my originators and all of my loan officers and all the people on my personal production team would be able to deliver the brand promise that separates us from everybody else, that gives us a wildly different value proposition. And in turn, what that did is that helped all of the clients that we work with fully trust us, not just during that transaction, but for life. And our clients now know, and they've become dependent on us in almost every aspect of real estate or finance. And our partners have done the same thing because it's now their value proposition. So as you're thinking through the steps you need to take to get from wherever you are now to wherever it is you want to go, know that you have to build systems and infrastructure to where everyone on your team can deliver your brand promise and what you're known for in the industry. And secondarily, you need to create a system where your clients trust you implicitly. And part of doing that is making sure you're asking all the right questions, not just the questions that are on the 1003. And it's ensuring that you're going the extra mile during and well after the transaction closes to continue to be proactive in your clients' lives and providing ongoing value. Right? That level of trust between you and your team, and between the client and the team, is incredibly important to be able to scale. So really make sure that you're building that out in your process. Another key component of trust and really what it means to scale is that you and your teammates have to relinquish your roles in order to grow. Right, when I first started back in 2011, it was just me. Right? I used some shared resources that the company had offered. But when I realized I was working 14 hours a day, and my girlfriend, who was going to be my fiance at the time, was very understanding. But I realized that couldn't persist. Right, I was doing my client conversations and my business partner conversations during the day, and then I was doing all my pre-approvals, my underwriting, income calculations, everything at night. And I realized I can't keep this pace up. There's no way I can just work 14 hours a day. And this is where most loan officers need to relinquish that control. Right? We have this control complex, or this captain save the day complex, where we place our value in the wrong areas. I've talked to and coached a lot of loan officers, and I say, why you? Why is it, what reason would a lender have, or would a realtor have to work with you? What reason would a client have to work with you? And a lot of them talk about values that are not highest and best use of their time, like, my pre-approvals are solid, they close every time, or we close on time, or we have great customer service, or we don't make mistakes, right? Or we're really great with problem solving and being creative on files. And all those things are really great, but none of them are meant for the leader of the organization to actually accomplish. And this is where you have to relinquish the control that you have over every little aspect of the file, over your marketing, over your business development, over your operations, your fulfillment, even your conversion at some point. And you have to give those roles to other people, right? And you have to entrust, first train, and then trust the fact that they're going to do it just as well, if not better than you. And that allows everybody in the system to then move up. And that's the most important part of scale, right? Is building leadership, empowering them knowing that you, as the leader of the organization, trust them to do their job implicitly. And over time, they become leaders and grow underneath you as well, because you just can't get from the millions of dollar range to the billions of dollar range without having really scalable systems, without having team members and infrastructure that is, you have trust all the way down the line. Right? And that's when you really created a business, because a business is something that will operate even without you being present. And trusting that your team will fulfill those processes is going to be important. As we get towards the end here, the last couple things you're going to want to know is, do you have a team in place that then will trust you to do what you need to do? And then ultimately, will you trust you? Now, there's two different things here. So in our world, we make it really clear what the distinctions are. We have a 1 to 10 kind of ranking scale. Right? So level 1 is someone who's maybe doing 0 to 3 loans a month, no real team members, a lot of different kind of variables. And then it goes level 1, level 2, 3, all the way up through level 10. And we were in the process of coaching one of our team leaders on how to get from a level 4 to a level 5, which is a pretty big jump. And it was clear because imagine this for a second. You don't talk to the client on the initial phone call. Right? You don't take the application or collect documents. You don't pre-approve the file. Right? You don't talk to the client and convert the business. Right? You don't pre-underwrite the file. You're not converting. You're not handling fulfillment. Right? Really, the only thing you do is a post-closing call with the client. Your team handles the rest. At that point, what do you do? And this is when I said the famous line from Warren Buffett, which was, you never know who's actually wearing a swimsuit until the tide goes out. And what I mean by that is, I said to our team leader, I said, well, now that all the jobs that you thought you were meant to do and all the things that gave you value are off of your plate, are you confident that you're going to go do the right things, which is leadership of the team and lead generation? And his answer was, I'm a little nervous, right? Because for the last 19 years, he had been focused on conversion and fulfillment, right? And dabbled in lead generation. But now he had to, first of all, his team had to trust that he was going to go do leadership at a high level and lead generation at a high level. Otherwise, they're going to look and say, well, if we're doing everything, what is he doing? And that's the key, is to continue to fire yourself from each step of the process all the way along. And then you have to entrust in yourself that I'm going to do this. You may not have focused exclusively on leadership and lead generation because you were really into conversion, you were in fulfillment, you were arguing with underwriters, you were putting out fires, you were updating realtors, right? When you trust your team to handle all those things and they trust you to go build the business, the last thing you have to do is just trust that you're actually going to go do that and you have all the capabilities in the world to accomplish it. Now, my takeaway here is, when you leave this conference, scaling is important, but using trust in your team members, in yourself, making sure your clients are trusting you, you trusting in your version of yourself and what you're doing is going to be imperative. It's going to be scary, right? Because you're not used to giving up control. It's going to be scary because you think there's this huge chasm between where you are today and where you want to go. But just take the first step, right? And one day you'll lift your head up and you'll walk around the world. In 2010, I was one decision away from quitting. I was also one decision away from doing something spectacular. I just didn't know it at the time. And I'm really glad I trusted in myself. I know you guys will be able to trust in yourselves and your teams to accomplish the same thing. Thank you for your time today.